It was clear early this week that some part of this sermon was going to have to be devoted to how we can have any kind of hope in this mess of a world and a nation. And it's been a changing landscape. I've rewritten this reflection several times this week, and here's the miracle. Each time I've written it, I've awakened the next day to someone having taken my advice that I hadn't even yet seen the light of day. So I don't need to tell you now that the ACLU needs to hear that there is no free speech at the point of a gun. On Thursday, they decided not to defend those who want to freely express themselves by intimidating those who don't agree with them using their weapons. Yes. Okay. And I don't have to suggest that a little private money could profitably go into the removing and replacing of the statues, which some believe are monuments to the supposed beauty of the antebellum South, but which are actually monuments put up a generation or two later, enforcing and celebrating Jim Crow. I had no sooner written that sentence than I heard that 3 professional sports teams in Tampa had issued a joint statement offering to finance a repeal and replace of the Confederate monument in Tampa, and that so it was back to the drawing board again. I didn't even dare to dream that the internet world, so devoted so far to open-mindedness that their brains have regularly fallen out, would finally see a clear line that they didn't want to be part of crossing. And company after company has withdrawn their supposedly neutral support for those who would overthrow neutrality. And yes, they'll find other platforms, but their life will be harder. Yes, after a dreary year and a horrifying past weekend and a predictably discouraging response by our president, it has been quite a week. Maybe I shouldn't have been surprised. After all, on Saturday, when former President Obama tweeted a quote from Nelson Mandela to the effect that nobody's born hating others because of their religion or skin color, that tweet got 25% more likes than any other tweet in the history of Twitter. And so many CEOs resigned from the president's council so that the president had to abolish them, apparently doing significant damage to his ability to get an economic and tax plan through Congress next fall. You know, the violent right has done it again. Being so shocking and so violent, they have provoked real change. It happened after a well-groomed young white man wrapped in a Confederate flag shot 9 African Americans praying together in a church. He wanted to start a race war, he said, but instead he brought unity to a divided city. And in the aftermath of that tragedy, many Southerners realized that their beloved symbol was not really benevolent, and the Confederate flags started to come down. Last weekend, we saw the horrifying whole of the white supremacy movement. Not just racist and anti-immigrant, but repellingly anti-Semitic and violent, and not at all a matter of aging people from the Rust Belt whom the economy had forgotten and who needed at least some attention and sympathy, but rather young men of power and privilege, faces contorted with hatred. It's so much easier now to see that these so-called monuments to the Confederacy have exactly the kind of power that Robert E. Lee told us they would have when he said he didn't want to be so memorialized. Things like this, he said, keep the open wounds of war and division. So the monuments are coming down or being put in their real context so we could actually learn from history. Turns out that it's not that hard to make a distinction between monuments erected to intimidate good people and egg on bad policies and monuments erected to imperfect people, and we are all imperfect people, who made substantive contributions to their communities and to their nation. Turns out that white supremacy is not just about enshrining white people by taking back power from immigrants of color and descendants of slaves. No. It's about enshrining Christianity, about scapegoating Jews, And in case it escaped your attention, these young men are not fans of women's participation in the halls of power either. And a movement that intends to take power from that many people so that they can prevail is a movement that is likely to be foregoing democracy, just as their idols, the fascists, did. And the president, in the end, cheered them on. That part was not a surprise to those who've been paying attention, but it was still shocking, and we still should be shocked and stay shocked. So stay shocked. Shocked is different from surprised. Surprise means you didn't expect something. Shocked means that whatever happened goes against your values. You were not really surprised to hear that there were enough well-heeled young men and well enough organized to hold a march, were you? And certainly you were not surprised that someone was either angry enough or mentally ill enough to plow their car through the crowd here and in foreign parts. No. We are awake, we pay attention, we are desperately sad, but we are not surprised. But we are shocked, and we should stay shocked, and we should express our shock, because no matter how often something happens, these things are still terrible and unjust and hateful and hurtful. To express that shock reminds ourselves of what we care about, and it reminds those around us of what we care about and how many of us there are. It's a way we can live in the world and not let the world numb us to its worst realities. So be shocked every time. And don't be afraid to be intolerant either. Learn what Facebook has learned, that when the tolerant value tolerance so much that they tolerate the intolerant, tolerance is endangered. Got that? It sounds a little funny, I know, but as a matter of fact, it is possible, logical, and important for the tolerant to tolerate everything except intolerance. So a lot happened last week, and a lot of it is profoundly hopeful. It seems to be turning out that the president is so problematic that the whole system is adjusting and stepping up around him. It may well be that we will see a new rebalancing of the balance of powers, which is tilted dangerously towards the presidency of late. And that is in no small part the cause of our polarized political system, because the president is of necessity either red or blue, while Congress, though it always has its majorities, is always deeply purple. And even before that happens, we saw this week that corporate America and even international leaders are stepping up into a vacuum and in new and effective ways. It's an interesting time to be leaving the ministry. But hey, now I'll have time to write letters to the editor. To show up where I'm needed, and to work for the local candidates who have become all the more empowered by the chaos of Washington. And you too, I know, will find ways to do more than stay shocked and intolerant of intolerance, I know. You too will be ready to join hands with those you trust and go wherever you are needed when the time comes. In his last tweet as president, which was another record breaker, President Obama said that his last ask is the same as his first was, that the American people have trust not in his ability to create change, but in their own. And I say the same. There's a little hope in the air today in the world, and a lot of hope in the air today in this room. And what we do with that hope is to keep on moving forward. So let's sing. I'm going to